This video is brought to you by dankritual.com. If you use the promo code DREW10 at checkout, you can get 10% off of your order of the tan or green 2-player cloth playmats. Get your playmat today. My promo code DREW10 also gives you 10% off of a pink or blue yokai deck box to keep your deck safe. So go ahead and grab one of those while you're getting your playmats too.
What is up, everybody? It is Drew, Traveler of the Burning Abyss, here with a highly requested video over the course of the last few months. It took me a while to get around to it. I had other ideas that I wanted to post on the channel, and I didn't want to spam everyone strictly with Burning Abyss content. I know that's what my channel is really known for, but I do like to have a variety here. That way everybody can see more than just one deck. I've always been a very firm believer in having diversity in your knowledge of matchups and your knowledge of just decks as a whole, because it just helps you out. So we're going to start off with talking about the Burning Abyss main deck. This is not going to be like my standard videos, I guess, because it's going to be a lot more in depth. Like my standard videos usually run about 15 to 20 minutes as it is, but this is going to be a very long video, so I just want to prep everyone in advance. This is something that you should watch either when you have a lot of time, or like if you're at work and you have the ability to sit back and like listen to something while you're working. That would probably be the best time to watch this video. So as you can see, we have the Burning Abyss lineup on my playmat right now. This is what I have changed my list to from my deck profile that I posted a few days ago. So I'm still playing the 3-3-3. I think this is always going to be correct. You just have to, and you'll see why it's even more important as we progress. Still the 2 Farfa, but I've upped it to 2 Libic. The 2 Alec is the same, and I don't think I was playing the Calcab. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. I really don't remember. But essentially, we're playing more BA names, and we're playing a lot more multiples. So the Farfas are already there, and the Alex, as everyone saw, were in the last profile, but we upped the Libic. The Barbar and the Calcab are just, more names. Sometimes the Barbar when you game, sometimes the Calcab will bait out a back row, but they're definitely not the best of all the BA monsters. I think everything else is really good. So I think that this lineup is really solid for what I'm going for. This isn't just a strictly like blind going second build. This can go first very, very easily. So that's something that I want to point out. It's got potential to go first or second, and can really do a number on your opponent. Now, the 2 Rhino Warrior is different. Usually I was playing 3. The 2 Tour Guide is the same, and the Snow is the same. So I cut the Rhino down to 2 in place of putting another Libic in, because my thought process was that like the Rhino Warrior really gets hurt by Imperm and Valor, and Libic just protects your BAs that you special from hand, so they can't be destroyed by their own card effect. So I'm actually kind of content with this, like, to be perfectly honest. I think that 2 is okay. I toyed around with the idea of playing none and just like playing all BA names and the 2 tour guides. But I feel like this card is really good for chain blocking, because if you detach like a graph, you mill 3 and you hit this, you do the graph chain 1, this chain 2 to send like something like a Skarm, and then you still get your BA combo to go off without being ashed or anything. So yeah, Rhino I'm 50-50 on. Like I don't think 3 is the right ratio anymore. I think it's getting lowered, and I think it'll progressively go lower. Like this is a very like board heavy meta. You have to break a lot of boards, and Rhino doesn't really break boards, it just chain blocks. So I'm almost leaning towards cutting both of these out and playing like a 3rd Farfa and then just another BA name to have as another special summon. But that's all theory. Like that's just all things that I've been contemplating lately. There's a lot that goes into my thought process with a lot of these ratios. So yeah, I won't go super in depth with what each of these cards do, especially this side, because everybody knows what this side does. The Barbar and the Calcab I shouldn't have to go in depth on. They're just other names. The Alec I kind of discussed in my deck profile. So, like, this card is obviously really good going second because you can Foolish Burial it, or you can send it off with Droplet, and you're just going to get an extra negation. Like, you could Droplet for 1 and then Alec negate something else, and your opponent is kind of, like, stuck. But, like, with there being a lot of monsters in the current meta that negate stuff or do these weird other effects, something like Alec isn't a bad idea. It just makes it so your opponent's board is shut off even more so. Additionally, you can detach off of Beatrice and send this in response to their Branded Fusion, and whatever they summon, that effect is going to be chain 1, and then your Alec can be chain 2 to negate their monster, and yeah, that's actually really good. So Alec is a super strong card, absolutely fantastic. I love this card. Like, there's so much that you can do with it. Very versatile. So yeah, that's my reason behind the Alex. The Libix, playing these at 2, I think this is pretty solid. I don't have any like issues with it. It's not like anything crazy. There have been people who have played 2 Libic before. It's basically so I can just avoid my BAs getting blown up. Like, that's all that it's here for. And then the Farfas, like, this could be at 3, it could be at 2. 2 is the minimum, but I don't know. This can help break boards apart a little bit, establish a Zeus play, but it's not like anything over the top. Like, I don't know. I feel like this card is just not as good as it could be. Like, it's not bad. Like, it was really good last format with Prank Kids. They normal Prank Kid and you send this and then you banish the Prank Kid and they basically just have to pass. So yeah, that's all the BA lineup stuff that I want to talk about. I've talked in depth in all my other videos about why Tour Guide doesn't need to be played at 3, and I went over the Rhino. So we're going to go ahead and jump into some of the other cards that we're playing in this Burning Abyss list. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the second portion of the main deck, which is basically the rest of it. Some cards are for going second, some cards are for going first, some cards are for both. So the cool thing is that a lot of the cards that you see on your screen right now are good going first or second because they're just versatile in the way that you utilize them, which to me is extremely important. I want versatility in my decks. I don't want a deck that only does one thing. I want a deck that can do multiple things, meaning that, you know, going first and second, it doesn't matter because I have things that can break boards. I have things that can slow my opponent down. So we're going to be discussing that. We'll start with the left-hand side and then we'll move over to the right afterwards. So 3 copies of Ash Blossom. This shouldn't need a lot of explanation. It's good against Branded Fusion. It's a generic negate pretty much for the entire game right now, just because everything searches and specials and all that. So yeah, Ash is really, really good. Good against a lot of decks. Obviously, like I said, the Branded Fusion is the big hit that you're really going to be looking for. But yeah, really good card as a whole. Additionally, we have 2 Effect Veiler and 3 Imperm. Somewhat, in some ways, they're the same card. Obviously, they're not exactly the same card, but they do have some very similar implications associated with them. One thing that's really cool about Veiler and Imperm is that if your opponent does get a Branded Fusion to successfully resolve, you can Veiler or Imperm the monster that they summon to negate its effect to attempt to fusion summon. So if they try to summon Albion or Lubellion, you just go ahead and Veiler or Imperm it, and yeah, they're basically going to sit there and struggle because now you've cut them off from continuing their plays. So Veiler and Imperm are good for that reason. Imperm is also good if you're going second, like, and you don't, like, they don't have anything on their board that you think is worth Imperming on their turn. When it comes to your turn, you could go ahead and you could Imperm one of their cards. So, like, one of the cool things is that you have the ability to Imperm a Moe when it gets normal summoned and it tries to use its effect. But let's say they start and they make a Baron, then at the start of your turn, you can just Imperm the Baron instead, and that's probably a better play if they start with, you know, making a Baron with Longyuan. So Imperm can be really good going second. It could be really good going first too, because you could set it in your back row and then you just flip it and negate your opponent's stuff. And if your opponent does fall for it, they might try and activate a card in the same column and it'll be negated because you had the Imperm set prior to that. So that doesn't happen very often. It's very rare that I see that happen. Only like newer players really fall for that, or really casual players. So Lastly, we have our Forbidden Droplet. I've made this clear before. I'll make it clear again because people always seem to nitpick when it comes to my videos. If you cannot afford a card, you can sub it out. I've said this a million times. Everyone always asks me on every single video, what can I sub for Droplet? Because Droplet's really expensive and I don't have the money to buy Droplet. Listen, I get it. You don't have the money to get Droplet, that's fine. I don't know how many times I have to say you can put Forbidden Chalice in your deck, but for like the millionth time, you can put Forbidden Chalice in your deck. I promise it is okay, and it is significantly cheaper. It's also getting an OTS super rare reprint, which just got announced today, I think, so that's pretty cool. But yes, if you cannot afford these, there are substitutes. You don't have to pretend that there's not substitutes. Yeah, and you know what they are too. I've said it a million times, and I think everyone has enough common sense to figure out what they are. So yes, Droplet is really good though. It's better than Chalice, but if you can't afford the Droplet, you can't afford the Droplet. Droplet is fantastic because not only can you negate your opponent's board, but you can also then trigger your BA effects afterwards. They'll hit the grave and then they'll trigger, which is really cool. So like one of the things that I talked about is the fact that something like Alec, you can use Droplet to send Alec to like negate a Baron, and then on the resolution you could just Alec negate the Qinglong. So you really only have to get rid of one card rather than getting rid of multiple. So yeah, that's really cool because then you negate both their cards. You can make like a Zeus play and then you just wipe their board. So that's really, really strong. Obviously, something like that is a play that can be very detrimental to your opponent's strategy. So that's all I'll talk on the left-hand side. I'm going to talk about the right-hand side. Double Desires. So I was pretty opposed to this before. Right now, I'm running it, and it's not bad. It's not, like, amazing, but it's not bad. I don't like just like a straight up trap version of BA anymore. I think that hand traps are kind of like a necessary evil. So like we have to play more of these board breaker and effect negation cards than we do like a bunch of back row. So Desires will let you draw into your board breaker cards if you're going second. If you're going first, it could draw you into your board breakers or your hand traps or even an Apocrypha, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So like to me, this card grants me 2 cards to my hand, and if I'm going first, that's really, really good because it's going to put me at 6 cards going first, and that's always good. And I'm playing so many multiples of all the important Burning Abyss monsters that I'm not really worried about banishing one of them. There's not really going to be, you know, that many times where I banish all 3 of the BA, and usually Desires is the last thing I resolve if possible. Like if I open a way to set up IP Beatrice and I'm going first and I have Desires too, I set up the IP Beatrice and then I have Desires after I've done all that, because it just saves me from, you know, getting hurt. Talking about Foolish Burial and Call by the Grave now. Foolish is an extender, and it's also somewhat of a board breaker because you could send a Farfa, you can send an Alec, and you can go ahead and shut off your opponent's monsters, or you could send a Calcab and you could bounce a set back row and hope that you hit the one that you want to hit. So to me, Foolish Burial is really good. If you open up 1 BA in Foolish Burial, at the minimum, you can at least make a Dante, and, you know, kind of be off to the races from there. So it's kind of good in that respect. I just think Foolish is a generically good card, and if like you're able to start your whole BA combo off, and you have your Foolish too, you could also just send Fairy Tale Snow, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, there's a lot that you can do with Foolish. I feel like I shouldn't have to go that in depth. It literally just says send a card from send a monster from your deck to the graveyard. As far as the call by goes, it's just for any hand traps that your opponent might have. I mean, we're in a pretty hand trap heavy format for the most part, so I don't want to go ahead and have my graph get hit by an Ash or something when I mill it, or detach it. So to me, I think that Call By is definitely a great card. I'm not going to go in depth with this because everyone knows it's a good card. As far as Apocrypha goes, so I am 50-50 on this right now. So my thought process currently is that going first or second, this card is really good. And the reason that it's really good going second is only because I'm playing Droplets and Imperm. because I can go ahead and I can set Apocrypha with like Droplet or Imperm, and then I can just clear their board no matter what, because if they try to negate it, I just flip whatever I have to flip to negate their cards. Also, Veiler helps in that situation too. So, like, Apocrypha is kind of just a board wipe, and it doesn't destroy, it sends. So, yeah, like, this card's really good because Despia and Sword Soul are decks that are currently thriving and surviving in the meta. So, like, something like Apocrypha is actually really, really solid. Other than that, though, there's not too much to talk about in the main deck. We're going to go ahead and now discuss the extra deck before we get to the side deck, and then we'll get into the actual how to play Burning Abyss in this format. So, yeah, let's go ahead and jump on over to the extra deck. All right, so let's talk extra deck. Now, I've really gone through a lot of different variations with the way that I form my extra deck for Burning Abyss, and honestly, I can't say I have a favorite because it changes so often, and I'm always trying to figure out, okay, if I swap this card out for that card, is it going to work well in conjunction, you know, with this play or that line of play? So for me, my extra deck changes just about as much as my main deck, and I feel that if you change one, you should probably change the other. That way you can kind of fit it to whatever you're trying to go for. And in this case, I really like this list, and the reason that I like it is because we're not playing Pot of Prosperity, so I don't have to play a second Downerd, because I was playing a second Downerd because of the Prosperity. I also didn't play as many Link monsters because of Prosperity, but now that we don't have the Prosperity in there, I can kind of fit some other cards in for different variations. I've gone off of some things that I've been thinking about, some things I've seen other people say as ideas, and I've kind of put them all together into one idea as a whole, and it seems like it's a decent plan so far. So I feel that the top row here doesn't need to be talked about. We already know why I'm playing these Burning Abyss cards. 2 Dante is fine. That's the only thing that, you know, really needs any kind of mentioning. You don't need to play a third regular Dante. It just doesn't really come up that often. The purple Dante is probably the only card in this extra deck that you could debatably cut for a different card. But, like, my whole thing is, I want to have that card because the second this card hits the field, your chances of winning the game increase at such a drastic level that it's worth playing the 1 copy, even though the only way you're going to summon it is off of Beatrice. So to me, this top row, that's all it really needs to be talked about. Second row here, the Downerd we kind of touched on, so I'm not going to really go over that. Basically, you can stack it over a Dante and then, you know, do your line of play. But as far as everything else goes, I think the DDD combo is probably your best way to go up into Zeus to start, because this is going to be a 3k attack monster, and that ensures you the ability to get over something like a Griffin. And if you can get over like Griffin, that's actually really good, because then you get rid of a negation, which, you know, is obviously what you're trying to do with this deck. You're trying to break a board. So I think that's important to note. Additionally, I've mentioned this before, it plays around Rivalry because, like, your BAs are fiends and the DDDs are fiends, and it gives you the ability to detach for Machinex's effect twice, because you detach 2 cards, steal their card, and then you detach the last card originally from this and whatever card you attached to it. So yeah, you get to steal 2 of your opponent's monsters. That's like the worst case scenario, if you can't, you know, make like a Zeus because of Rivalry. So yeah, I think that this package is really, really strong, super strong. And then the Zeus, I will always play a minimum of 2 Zeus in this deck unless it gets limited. Like, this card's fantastic. There are XYZ builds that I would play that play like only XYZ monsters and the 1 Fusion Dante, and in those lists I'd probably play a third. But in this list I'm playing Link cards, so we play 2. But yeah, that's all I really need to talk about on this side. Like, Zeus is just the best card in the extra deck, but I think everybody already knew that. Moving on to the Links, though, the Cherubini is really good going second to help you Link climb up into like a Unicorn access code, so that's kind of neat. IP is like your standard going first play. Like you go IP and Beatrice, and then you pass, and then your opponent just kind of struggles because you'll have a few interruptions. And then we have Dark. This card's ridiculous in this deck. You can just steal whatever you want from your opponent's grave and then just, make a unicorn and so on and so forth. So yeah, Dark's a really good card. Then we have the Phoenix, the Unicorn. These are pretty standard. I don't think there's a reason to play Cerberus. Like, sure, it's good, but we really don't have the room in this deck, and I don't think it's worth cutting like Purple Dante for a Cerberus. I think that there are far better cards that you could play if you're willing to cut the Purple Dante, but I still think Purple Dante is the way to go. Lastly, we have the Access Code. This card will usually win you a lot of games, but I've found lately, as I've played this deck more, Zeus just kind of wins games. Like, you clear your opponent's board, you don't even have time to make an access code because they scoop before you can even get there. So, like, that's why I'm not super huge on link monsters in this deck, because, like, you make a Zeus, you wipe their board, and then your opponent's just like, yeah, I think that's it. Because they have no follow-up. They have nothing they could do. They expended all the resources, and you've wiped their entire board. So, access code does come up, but Zeus is definitely the better boss monster. That is my discussion on the extra deck, though. We're going to go ahead and hop on to the side deck and, touch on that and as to why I'm playing the cards that I'm playing. And then after we do the side deck talk, we will jump into the real nitty-gritty, which is, the actual how-tos of this deck. So I think that's what everyone's here for. So let's go ahead, hop through the side deck, and then we'll get to the really good stuff. All right, so time to talk about the side deck. This is what I think most of the standard BA side deck should look like. It's just a personal opinion, but this is what I'm thinking is probably the best way to go. So we'll start with the top left, which would be our Necroworld Banshee and our 2 copies of Zombie World. So in a lot of decks, sure, like especially the Despia branded deck, you can just play 1 and 1. But in this deck, if you detach off of a Dante and you mill 3 and you mill a Zombie World, it's like, oh man, like now I can't use it. So I'd rather play the 2 and chance drawing it. Like that, drawing it isn't that bad if you're using it against the matchups that it has to be used against. So yeah, Zombie World's really good. The Banshee's really good. You just send this off of Beatrice and you're good to go. If you're looking at it and you're going, I really think that I'd rather play 1 Zombie World, then you can always put in a copy of Token Collector. I cut my copies of Token Collector because I didn't find that they were doing as much as I wanted them to. So, like, to me, it wasn't as useful of a card. The card is still really good. I just wasn't getting as much use out of it, so I opted to go with other cards that I do get a solid use out of. So, but adjust to whatever your local scene is looking like, your regional scene, and just go based off of that. My lists are not final for anyone other than myself. Like that's basically how I look at it. You guys can build your decks however you want to build them. I'm just here to show you how I do this and explain why. So moving on, we have the Twisters and the Evenlies. These are probably, I mean, it's tough to say. They're the best going second cards in the deck for sure. Like, these cards are insane. Like, this is just going to outmine, which is really good, and Evenly is just going to get rid of whatever, or bait negations. Like, this card is insane. If you can go ahead and, like, draw Evenly and Droplet against something like, the based-esque deck that's running around, it's really just, like, Punk Synchro, whatever you want to call it. There's a million different names for the deck. But, like, you draw Evenly, you go battle phase, you activate it, they have like a token up or something, if they have a token up still. They try to negate it, and you go ahead and you chain Droplet, you send the Evenly and a monster from hand, and you basically force them to keep the token. Like, it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, Evenly is really good. Then the going first cards, 3 anti-spell and 3 D-barrier. These don't really have to be discussed too much. I think everybody knows why we would play these. Like, they are so good against so many matchups. You know, the D barrier is obviously solid against most of the meta, which is the important part, but anti-spell, in my opinion, is good against pretty much everything. Like, this card comes in clutch against almost every single matchup that I've ever played against in my entire life. I am a huge proponent of playing anti-spell fragrance. I think I called it evenly a second ago. I apologize. I'm a huge proponent of playing anti-spell fragrance because the card just shuts people down for an entire turn, which usually, no matter what deck you're playing, is enough to build enough momentum to either OTK them or just completely lock them out so they can't do anything at all. So to me, playing something like anti-spell is fantastic. As I said, the D barrier is really good against the meta. So that's my discussions on the side deck. I don't think it needs a lot of explaining. You know, you have back row removal. This also counts as like board wiping stuff. You have stuff for... I didn't talk... Actually, I'm sorry. I didn't talk about why Necroworld, Banshee, and Zombie World are good. So, to start, we'll start with Flunder. Like, it just completely blows Flunder out of the water. So that's always a plus. Additionally, it's very, very strong against decks like Salamangreat, because they require, you know, a lot of Cyberse monsters, but this will turn them into zombies. It's very good against Sword Soul because now all of their monsters become zombies instead of worms, which is fantastic. Yeah, it's just, there's a lot of decks that it's really good against. I don't want to sit here and say it's, you know, it's the be-all, end-all, because there are a lot of decks that can play through it, but, like, it's still a really, really good thing to have. Like, having these cards is fantastic. So yeah, but that's my discussion on the side deck. We're going to go ahead and now get into the really good stuff that everybody is probably here for, which is, you know, the how-tos with this deck. And I've done a how-to play Burning Abyss video in the past. It's done very well. So this is my current iteration for how to play Burning Abyss. So let's jump into it, take a look, and see just exactly what goes through my mind when I play this deck. All right, everyone, so now we've made it to the portion of the video that we've all been waiting for, or I should say you all have been waiting for, which is the real meat and potatoes of this video, and that is basically the how-to portion of Burning Abyss. This is going to be very in-depth. There's going to be a lot of information that we go over. I'm going to explain it as thoroughly as possible. Hopefully nobody has a bunch of questions because I'll be able to explain it in detail. But in case anybody does, obviously you guys know the comment section is something that I pay somewhat close attention to. I'll respond to a lot of comments and whatnot and try and answer everyone's questions as much as possible. But we're going to start, as you can see, discussing the basic line in the deck, which is essentially your end board that you're going for on turn one every single turn. Now, these particular lineups are the possibilities that you have to get the basic combo off. So you could either draw just a tour guide, you could draw a Graph and a BA, or you could draw a Rhino Warrior and a BA. In my personal opinion, I think the Graph and the BA are probably your best bet right now, because with things like Valor and Imperm running around, and Ash too, like, Tour Guide isn't as strong. The Rhino gets hurt by the Imperm and the Valor. So, like, to me, looking at it, if I'm going to recommend, you know, something, and I'm going to tell you what the strongest way to open is, it's Graph and another BA. That's just what I personally see every single time I play, is that if I see Graph and a BA, it's very, very ideal. That being said, I'm going to show it with the tour guide, because it's all the same no matter how you open these. The only thing that changes is with the Rhino, depending on what you mill off of your Dante, can change what you're sending with the Rhino. Because if you mill if you detach the Rhino and you mill a Graph, you do Graph chain 1, Rhino chain 2 to send Skarm. But we'll see that shortly, and we'll obviously go over it. But essentially what the basic line is that you would normal tour guide and you'd trigger Tour Guide's effect to summon a Graph, and then you'd make Dante. You'd detach and you'd mill 3 random cards, and then the Graph would trigger, which would summon a copy of Seer. So we get a Seer out, and then we link these two into an IP, and then we get the Seer as Chainlink 1 to target Dante. I always do it in this order. I always do Seer target Dante, that way they can't chain block this with like a Ghost Spell. So Seer target Dante is Chainlink 1, Dante is Chainlink 2 target Seer. So the Seer will come to our hand, and the Dante will hit the board, and then we can discard the Seer, and that'll allow us to make a Beatrice. So this is the basic line. We have 6 cards in graveyard right now. If you have more, then obviously you can, like, you know, send Fairy Tale Snow on your opponent's turn and do some stuff. But in this scenario, we can use Beatrice during our opponent's turn to send something like a Farfa, or if they activate Branded Fusion, you can chain Beatrice to Branded Fusion. You send your copy of Alec, or a copy of Alec, seeing this list is playing 2. So then the Alec hits the grave. Dante is chain 1 to target Seer, and then Alec would be chain 2 to target their mom. I'm sorry. So your opponent's, I have to backtrack here. So the Beatrice was chained to Branded Fusion. We detached the Dante and sent the Alec. Their Albion or Lubellion now will trigger its effect as Chainlink 1. Chainlink 2 will be Dante to target Seer, and Chainlink 3 will be Alec to negate their monster. So their monster's now negated. We get this back to hand, and they try and proceed with their plays at some point. Then our IP triggers, and we can link these two for a Nightmare Unicorn. The Unicorn triggers discarding the Seer to shuffle a card from their field, and then Seer effect will summon the Dante back out, and we've established that continual Dante Seer loop. So it is multiple interruptions against a lot of decks. Against something like Sword Soul, you can send a Farfa and you can banish their token, and their token does not return at the end of the turn, because if a token is banished, it doesn't come back. So that's a really good reason to send Farfa. If they're playing a back row deck, you could always send a Calcab in like end phase to get one of their back rows back to their hand. So there's a lot of things you can really do with your standard IP Beatrice combo. And the cool thing is that if you Beatrice send Calcab and then you IP into Unicorn, you get rid of 2 of their back row before it's even your turn. So it's actually like really, really good. Like that's very strong. So like keep that in mind. It's something that's actually pretty ridiculous. So that's like the basic line that, you know, really changes stuff. But like I don't think that there's an excessive amount to go over with the basic lines, because if you've been playing the deck, you probably know by now. But if you haven't been playing the deck, you know, obviously I can answer a lot of questions, and this is going to be pretty informative. So one of the things that you know, I think is important to note is there are going to be hands that you open that are really weird. So like I'll just give you like a hand that's not great, but a hand that's not terrible. So like let's say we're going first, and this is our opening hand. I'm just going to throw some cards on top here, just for the sake of argument. So let's say we open up a weird hand. We have like 3 names, and then we have like 2 hand traps, and we're going first. And it's like, okay, this is a little odd. Like what do we do? So what I would do is I would special the Barbar, and I would special the Libic. I'm going to move all this back a little bit so we don't get as much glare. So then we go ahead and we make our Dante. I would detach the Libic because the Barbar can burn later, and right now Libic isn't doing anything for us. And we'd mill our 3, and they hit the grave, and I threw 3 cards on top that were random just so it wasn't like, oh, we're hitting a graph or whatever. But then you discard your Skarm to make your Beatrice. And then you would basically set the imperm in whatever column you want, and end phase your Skarm would trigger. And when your Skarm triggers, you have an important choice to make, okay? So I know, I want to point this out too, because I am playing the Purple Dante. So this is actually really important. If you know that your opponent is going to probably destroy your Beatrice, then you should have your search at the end phase be for Graf. If you know they're not going to destroy the Beatrice, or you have a feeling they won't destroy the Beatrice, then your search can be for your tour guide. The reason that you contemplating them popping the Beatrice could happen, so you choose Graf instead, is because the Beatrice will get destroyed and you get to summon your Purple Dante, which can discard the Graf to draw a card, and then Graf can summon another Skarm from your deck, which then if they destroy it in the end phase, you get to search your tour guide. So you're effectively deck thinning over and over again, which is really, really good. So like if you know they're going to pop the Beatrice, add the Graf to your hand, because during their turn, you can do something like detach. We're going to detach the Barbar in this scenario. Actually, you know what? No, we're going to detach the Dante. I'm sorry. So we'll detach the Dante and we'll send whatever we need to send. Like it's obviously up to you guys just what you need to send depending on the scenario. Maybe a Farfa is useful. Maybe the Alec, wherever one of my Alecs are. There we go. Maybe an Alec is useful. Maybe you do want to send Fairy Tale Snow, even though you really don't have the resources to do so, effectively, I should say. So like you have 3 cards here that are probably pretty good bets as far as what you want to send to grave. So you just have to figure out, okay, what's best in this scenario. So let's say it's Farfa, just in this example. We send the Farfa, we banish whatever we have to banish, and our Dante also has the opportunity to add a card back. I would probably add the Farfa back just for more spot removal, because we could possibly get a Skarm to hit the board. So let's say our opponent destroys the Beatrice, because we did mention that. The Beatrice triggers, and we get to summon Purple Dante. And while he is on the board, we will use his effect to discard the Graf to draw a card. We drew a tour guide, cool. So then the Graf triggers. We're going to leave this face down, just say it's a... Well, he will grab a random card and just say it's a blank. Yeah, we'll just say we drew a blank. Graf will trigger, and that'll summon... Copy of Skarm. So now we have Skarm and Purple Dante, and if we have to use like the Imperm and the Veiler, we can. That's the other cool part. If you do send Fairy Tale Snow, you have Imperm and Veiler to fuel your graveyard even more, which is actually pretty useful. So you will have enough materials at that point to do stuff. And then, when it comes back to our turn, if they don't destroy the Skarm, we draw into, whatever blank. And from here, we could normal the Farfa, and you can make a Dante, and then you could mill 3. And then after you mill the 3, the Farfa would trigger to banish one of their cards, on top of whatever else we could mill, like a Rhino. And we mill a Snow. So like, yeah, there's a lot that can be done, even with awkward hands. It's about like being really grindy with this deck. Like this is a deck that you have to sit there and you have to grind it out. Like you're not going to sit there and turn 1 just OTK your opponent out of the blue. For the most part, it could happen, but it's very uncommon. You're probably not going to be setting up these crazy super illustrious boards. It's going to be very basic in play style, but that's the beautiful thing about this deck, is that you do not have to do anything crazy. You can do very simple lines of play and get them to function. Additionally, something that I think I've already covered, but I'm going to cover it a little more in depth, and that is the usage of Forbidden Droplet with cards like Farfa and Alec. Obviously, this kind of goes for all of your BAs, but I want to talk about it with Farfa and Alec specifically. So if you look at your opponent's board and you're like, okay, I gotta break this field, like this field just needs to be torn apart, how am I gonna do it? And you're like, okay, well, I have, actually, you know what we'll do? We're gonna grab another BA. So let's say your opponent's Sword Soul board has a copy of Baron and a copy of Chijao, and they don't have anything else on field. Like that's all they set up. They set up a very basic combo. They didn't get a blackout. Like they just have something very basic. And you're looking at it and you're going, okay, if I normal the Graf and I special either of my BAs and I make like you know, something to attack over, and then I make a Zeus, they're still going to negate my Zeus because they're going to be able to have like the Baron there to just stop it. And you're like, okay, so what do I do? What do I do? Because if I send 2 of these cards, except for the Graph, because like the Graph is actually, you know what? We'll get rid of the Graph and grab another random BA because the Graph actually lets us combo off really hard. So we'll grab the CalCab instead because it does nothing. So you're looking at this and you're going, okay, if I send 2 of these cards, I can't like do a Dante play. I can't do any other plays. Like what do I do? So you can play around that Sword Soul board by using Droplet and sending just 1. And it can be either Farfa or Alec. Either one of these gets the job done. So let's say we send the Alec because the Alec is actually better to send in this situation. So we send the Alec to negate the Baron. Okay, so the Baron is now negated. On resolution, our Alec will then negate the Chi Zhao. So now the Chi Zhao is shut off and the Baron is shut off. We can now special the CalCab and normal the Farfa. And from here, normally, like you could do Dante and you could mill stuff. But what I would do is I would actually make the King Darius and the Machinex. So the reason that I lean towards these is that you're going to be able to make a 4 material Zeus versus a 2 material Zeus, because you're going to have to mill 3 off of Dante to get him to 25 to attack off the Baron. So like when you do the detach, now even if you overlay downward, you're only at 3 materials. So you do the Machinex because then the Machinex can kill the Baron. And then main phase 2, you could just slap a Zeus right on top of these. And then you can detach to send, you know, their other cards. And then during their turn, the cool part is that you have Farfa and CalCab on Zeus as materials. So like, obviously you're going to send their whole board, but let's say something was unaffected or whatever. The Farfa could then deal with whatever was, you know, unaffected by that particular effect. Or if they like negated this with a monster effect, then the Farfa could banish their monster for the turn, and it might save you a turn in the game, and you may not just, you know, get OTK'd. So yeah, it's a very grindy thing to do, but I wanted to talk about, you know, the awkward hands too, because some people look at Droplet and they're like, okay, like what do I Droplet? How do I properly Droplet in these weird scenarios? Because this is a weird hand. Like, this is a very awkward hand, and if we throw like a random other card in it, like Forbidden Apocrypha, like obviously the Apocrypha would be good against Sword Soul after we break their board, but just drawing it, you're like, okay, like whatever, I can't really do much with this. So to me, this is actually a good hand. Like, I see a really good hand with this because of how the deck is going to grind things out. So yeah, Droplet is really good, it coinciding with Alec and Farfa for those reasons. But we're going to go ahead and jump on over to some test hands now, because I know people do like to see me do test hands a lot. I know people enjoy watching me do the test hands and the live duels, and I feel like the Burning Abyss instructional videos are also helpful. But let's go ahead and jump on over to some test hands. I'm just going to grab a drink of water off camera. All right, so I've also swapped up some lighting for this. I'm literally sitting in the dark with just my flash on because it actually gives really good lighting. So we're gonna roll with it. I'm gonna give you guys some test hands. They're gonna be really in depth. I'm gonna talk about what I would personally do. Obviously it'll vary per matchup, so this will be pretty informative. So we'll grab 5 cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Looking at the hand, so this is okay going first or second. It's probably a little better going second because of double hand trap, but we'll play it out regardless. In this scenario, I would actually start with the Desires going first because I have 2 of the same name, and I kind of want a different name to be associated with the hand. So you could start with that going first. That'd probably be your best bet. So we'll banish 10. There's 5, there's 9, and 10. We'll assume we don't get hit with a hand trap, and we draw 2. Cool. Graph Tour Guide, pretty good. Looking at the hand now, or looking at the banished, we lost the Snow, we lost the Called By, we lost 2 Droplets, and we lost a 3rd Skarm and both Farfa. That's perfectly fine. it's still fully playable. Like, we still can send stuff and get things done. So I would not use Tour Guide turn 1. I try and make that clear in almost all my videos. You almost don't want to draw this card. You kind of want to search it off of Scarm. But that's neither here nor there. So we normal the graph and we special Scarm, and we make a Dante. And then our Dante gets to mill 3 cards. And we hit 3 hand traps. Cool. Graph effect triggers to summon a Seer. Now, if you were to get hit with like an Ash or something there to the graph, you would just discard your Scarm and make Beatrice on top of the Dante, and you'd call it a turn there. But we're going to say that that doesn't happen. I'm just showing you guys how I would play it, and I'll give you the alternative things to do too when they come up. So these get linked for Beatrice, and then the Seer and the Dante will trigger. So Seer 1 target Dante, Dante 2 target Seer, which comes to hand. This gets specialed, and then we get to discard the Seer to go ahead and make our Beatrice. Sweet. And from here we get to set our imperm, and we do pass. Our Scarm does not trigger because it was special summoned, which is why we didn't discard the other one to make the Beatrice. We got rid of the Seer because we can recur the Seer back with the Dante when we attached off of Beatrice. So during our opponent's turn, we have the opportunity to imperm them. We have the opportunity to Beatrice effect, which in this case is going to be somewhat subpar because we don't have like all the cards that we necessarily would send. We lost both Farfa and we lost our Snow, so like that's kind of subpar. But we can send the Alec, and then the Dante would target Seer as Chainlink 1, and the Alec would negate one of their monsters as Chainlink 2. So this comes back to hand, and then during our opponent's turn, we can Valor them on something, and then we can IP to make something like Unicorn, and then Unicorn can discard either Skarmer or Seer depending on the situation. If they like have nothing left to do, discard the Skarm because then you can search an end phase. But if they have, you know, more things they could do, you send the Seer. That way it can summon the Dante back, and you just provide yourself a little more insurance so they may not be able to OTK you. So yeah, that's like the basic combo, because we got where we normally want to get, ending on IP and Beatrice. So a lot of these hands are going to look the same. That's the one thing that I don't want people to be disappointed by. It's why I don't do a lot of test hand videos with Burning Abyss. I rather just do like live duels, because like to me, the deck does pretty much the same thing every single turn one. Obviously going second, it can vary, but I think that, you know, regardless, it's still something that functions at a certain level of similarity almost every single hand, which is something that I like. It's linear, it does the same thing, it does what it's intended to do, and that's all I could really ask for. So now we got 5 more cards. We opened double Desires, so at least we won't draw Desires off of Desires. So we're going to go ahead and do this. We will banish our 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Not, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That would have been bad. 9 and 10. Now we draw 2. There's a Foolish and a Farfa. And we have banished, let's see, Tour Guide Rhino. Okay, this was actually a good banish. This didn't really hurt us that much. So go ahead and toss that there. Now, from here, we're going to have a pretty interesting turn. I actually want to double check this. Did I banish any Farfas? No, I didn't. Okay, good. From here, we have a couple things we can do. Now, for me personally, I'm going to special summon the Libic, and then I'm going to special summon the Farfa. I'm going to overlay them for Dante. I still will detach to mill 3 because it puts more cards in my grave. We also hit a Skarm. We're not going to use Seer's effect, so leave the Seer where it is in grave. It's not going to trigger to summon anything. It's just going to sit there. Reason being is we're going to normal summon the Seer from our hand, and then we will link the Seer and the Dante, and we'll make our IP. That will then trigger our Seer and our Dante. So this comes back to hand. This hits the board. And from here, we can discard the Seer again because we're going to recur it back. And I want to keep the Libic in hand for later. And then we get to make the Beatrice here because we discarded the Seer. Now, from here, we're going to activate Foolish Burial. The reason we activate Foolish is because it gets us further in the combo. So we milled the Scarm, so we're not going to send anything like Rhino. In this scenario, I'm going to be sending Fairy Tale Snow. So Snow hits Grave. We also have a bunch of cards in Grave, which is going to be good for our Snow on our opponent's turn. I also never shotgun Snow. Snow is usually one of the last things that I trigger, so I have more cards in my graveyard by the time it gets to that point. So from here, I would go to end phase, and I would trigger Scarm's effect to search. And in this case, I think I'm going to grab Tour Guide. So I'll grab the Tour Guide, and we mix that up. And we pass our turn. And during our opponent's turn, let's say they like activate Branded Fusion. You chain your Beatrice, and you send your Alec. Their monster will be Chainlink 1. Our Dante will be Chainlink 2 to target Seer. And our Alec will be Chainlink 3 to negate their monster. So this then comes to hand. And now they start to progress through their turn a little bit more. We activate our IP. They get a fusion monster out. And now we get to summon our Nightmare Unicorn. We trigger the effect, discarding the Seer to shuffle one of their fusions back. And then Seer will trigger to special summon the Dante back to the board. So now looking at our graveyard, you can see we have a pretty stacked graveyard now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 cards. So because we have 12 cards, if they try and progress, we can Fairy Tale Snow. And the first thing we do is we get rid of the insignificant cards in our graveyard. So that helps us narrow down what we really are going to do. So you're not going to be bringing Beatrice back at any point. So these are 5 cards already that we can get rid of. No problem banishing them. Now you just have to narrow it down to 2. So from these cards, we know that we've got a Libic in hand. And we know that we already have another Seer in Grave. We have another Farfa in deck. And I believe we have another Alec in deck. So I don't think we banished an Alec here. So we didn't banish an Alec. So for me personally, Alec is probably the least useful. So I'm going to banish the Alec. And then we have to pick one more card, which I'm going to go with the Libic, seeing we have the other one in hand. Now the Snow would hit the board, and we would get to Book of Moon one of their cards. And we would hope that that's enough to stop them for the turn. That's a lot of interruptions, though. Like, that really is a lot to slow them down and make it so they can't do much on their turn. And the cool part is, let's say that they're able to kill our Fairy Tale Snow. Actually, we'll say they banish it somehow. And then they get rid of our Dante, which would be a mistake on their part because we just get the Seer back. But we'll assume that they made a mistake. It happens. People do make mistakes when they play. And then it comes back to us. Okay? So from here, this hand is just cracked. Like, this is really good. The only downside is that we have the Libic banished and we have the other one in hand. So our Tour Guide isn't summoning from deck when we summon it because, like, it's trying to get the Libic out because we want to try an OTK here. So we summon the Tour Guide, and that will get the Libic out from hand. From here, we can overlay. We can make a Dante, and we will trigger our Dante to mill 3 cards. 1, 2, and 3. That's a really good mill hitting the graph. So our graph is going to be Chainlink 1, and our Libic will be Chainlink 2. So Libic will summon the Seer, and then from deck, we will get to summon the card that's going to help us put enough damage on board, and that is Barbar. So when Barbar hits the board, because we control Nightmare Unicorn, which is a non-VA, this is automatically destroyed, and its graveyard effect will trigger to banish 3 cards, which we're going to banish the Farfa as number 1, the Libic is number 2, and seeing we have a graph in hand, I'm going to banish the graph as number 3. So our opponent takes 900. We're assuming that they have, like 1 monster on board right now, 1 or 2 monsters on board. And from here, we can go ahead and do a couple different things. Kind of depends on where you want to run with this and what you think your opponent is going to be, you know, outputting. But for the most part, like, this is going to be pretty simple. So you can do multiple things against the Despia deck that are insane in this scenario, like really, really insane. For me personally, the Access Code is probably your best line of play to be running with, but they've taken 900 points of damage here, okay? This is already another 25, so that puts them 34 down. So all we have to do is hit for 56. Like, 56 is the magic number, and that gets us where we need to be, being able to do that much damage. So keep that in mind, or just setting up a board that they can't break through. So here we can go ahead and link. We make the Access Code. The Seer will trigger, which can summon the Dante out. Or the other possibility, you could keep the Farfa engraved and banish one of the other cards instead, and then you summon the Farfa back, banish one of their monsters. Then Access Code can pop, you know, if they have multiple monsters. We're assuming they only have one monster in this scenario. But if they had multiple, you keep the Farfa, banish one of the other BAs for the Barbar, and then your Access Code would pop the last monster, and now you're hitting for what will be 53 and 25, which is going to be 78, but you already hit them for 900 off the Barbar, so that is game. So you don't have to worry if you did pop a Mirror Jade with your Access Code, because it's not going to make a difference. So that's pretty important. That's like how I would play a hand like that out. That's pretty crazy stuff, being able to interrupt our opponent like that. Obviously, this deck has a lot of gas. Like, it can just go and outgrind a lot of other decks, which is one of the things that I really like about it. Like, the fact that this deck can grind so much, and really, like, this deck honestly annoys people because they try and, like, beat it, and it's very hard to beat this deck because it just slows them down and it keeps you at a consistent pace the entire time. Like, the entire time. That's the thing about this deck that I've personally fallen in love with and have loved for years, is that it's not a super fast-paced deck, but it's not the slowest deck in the room. Like, it can definitely just grind through some boards. So, draw another hand here. There's 5. All right, so we've opened up Desires like almost every single hand. We have Skarms, which, like, I think we Desires first again because I want to see another name, another random name, hopefully. So there's 5, 9, and 10. We draw 2. Barbar is perfect. That's really perfect. Let's see what we banished. Oh, don't tell me there's a third Seer in there. Okay, so we still have 1 Seer left. This is why I play 3 Seer. Like, we're playing Desires. We banished the other 2 Graphs too. Wow. This was a rough banish, but we can still play. We still have everything we need. So that's the important part. We still have everything we need to play the deck. We still have our Snows, our Libics, our Farfas. So we normal summon the Graph. We special summon the Barbar. We overlay for the Dante. In this scenario, we're going to mill 3 and hope we don't hit a Seer. We do hit our second Tour Guide, though, because we have 1 banished, I believe. Yeah, we do have 1 banish. So no Tour Guides for this game. Tour Guide is basically just out of the equation as a whole, which is fine. We can play the game without Tour Guide. I've made that clear before. So our Graph now triggers, and we'll summon the 3rd Seer from the deck. And give this a little shuffle. And then you can link these for your IP for your standard combo. As we already know, Dante will come out, the Seer will come to hand. Now, normally, as you've seen in the prior hands, I've discarded the Seer. In this scenario, we don't have a Skarm in graveyard yet to trigger, so we are going to discard the Skarm this time to make the Beatrice. Now that we've done that, we will get a Skarm trigger in end phase, which is cool. But the other thing is, I'm going to set Droplet and Imperm. And then in the end phase, our Skarm will trigger. Now, normally we'd grab either Graph or Tour Guide, but we are out of Graph or Tour Guide. So what do we do? The cool part here is that we have 2 choices, our Alec and our Farfa. And the reason that we would pick one of these is that our Beatrice is going to send the opposing one. Whatever one we don't need in hand immediately, the Beatrice will send. So you can pick between either of these 2, because in this scenario, none of these other cards are really worth it. So you either add Alec or Farfa. So I'm going to grab Farfa because it's just quick and easy spot removal. And from here, it goes to our opponent's turn, which they're going to go ahead and start to do their plays, which is fine, because we can do Beatrice and send Fairy Tale Snow. And then our Dante would trigger to basically add back whatever we find necessary. So for me, I personally would probably go with the Graph, because it is literally every BA name. So that's pretty important. Additionally, we could obviously use IP and Beatrice to go into a play here, but I'm not going to do that. The reason being is that I can droplet, and let's say I want to negate 2 cards. I can send Seer and Farfa, and then after that, I can trigger the Seer as Chainlink 1 to target Dante, and Farfa Chainlink 2 to target one of their monsters. This then hits the board. Then if my opponent tries to do something additionally, I can do the IP to link the Dante and keep the Beatrice. The Beatrice now stays, which is really important. So now the Unicorn hits the board. Our Unicorn can be Chainlink 1 or 2 depending on what you fear, but I usually like to do Dante in this scenario is Chainlink 1. So Dante Chainlink 1, we're going to discard the Skarm, and when the Skarm will hit the grave, obviously during the end phase it'll do something, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. And then the Dante will add the Seer back to hand. So now we've got our Seer Dante loop still going. One of their cards is now gone. If they try and do anything else, we have the Imperm. And if they try and push the Matter after that, we can Snow. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because we're keeping basically all the BA cards and banishing everything that is a non-BA that we won't be using anymore. And then the Snow hits the board. We Book of Moon one of their monsters, and that's probably going to be enough to stop them. Like, I don't see a scenario where that isn't enough to stop them. If they don't clear any of this, we draw for turn. Now this is really cracked, like ridiculously cracked here. So if they have like a back row, as crazy as it sounds, you can link the Beatrice and the Snow away, and you can make Phoenix. Phoenix will then discard Libic. So Libic hits the grave, pops one of their back row, and it's co-linked here, so you get to draw a card. Then the Libic would trigger to special summon the Seer from our hand. And then you can use Seer and Unicorn to go into your access code, which is pretty crazy. So Seer would be Chainlink 1 to target Dante in your grave, and then access code would be Chainlink 2 to target the Unicorn, so it'll gain. This hits the board. Our access code can then pop a card, which is pretty nutty. If you need to banish the Phoenix from field, because in case nobody knew, I'm going to bring this up here just so everyone can see. So banish link monster from your field or graveyard. So you can banish link monsters from your field or graveyard. So you could banish the Phoenix if need be. If you don't have to, you don't have to. But if you need to, you can. So at that point, you're putting out a lot of damage. This is 53, 63, 72. This is 8,200 on your board. On top of that, you have Snow and Grave. So, and you can banish cards from hand for Snow as well. So if you have to like really push, you can. You're not going to go into any of the other cards in the extra deck unless you can't kill your opponent this turn. Then during your main phase 2, you would go downward into Zeus, and then you could set Apocrypha, and that would be really good, especially against Despia. So yeah, that's how I would navigate that hand. But yeah, that's like, I don't know how much further in depth I can go with explaining how to run against certain matchups. Like, I feel like the most important decks to talk about really are Despia and Sword Soul. Like, those in my opinion are the 2 decks to talk about. You could say that, you know, Therion, Punk, whatever, could be thrown into the mix there too, because that deck is really good. But at the same time, like, once again, you can Apocrypha them. You can do things like Droplet. You can do things like Imperm and be able to cut them off. So I'm going to do one more test hand just so everyone can get the gist of how I play the deck, and hopefully that educates everyone as to how I like to run my plays. That way people can kind of get the idea of what runs through my head when I'm playing this deck, because this is one of the only decks that I currently enjoy playing and actually do play. I'm not, for the most, like, I have everything for meta decks, but basically it's just for me to post videos on those meta decks. All right, so this might be a hand that I can show going second. Yeah, we're going to show this going second. So going second, this is actually pretty darn good. So we can hand trap our opponent twice, whatever we need to hand trap, cool. And then it comes to our turn. And this is pretty darn good if they're playing like a break my board kind of deck. You can always like normal summon the tour guide, and you can trigger the effect. And if they try and negate the tour guide, then you can just droplet, and you could send like Skarm Farfa to negate whatever monsters they have. And then this will resolve to summon the Graph. And then after the Graph hits the board, your Farfa can banish. Like if they had 3 negates, your Farfa could banish the 3rd negation because you negated 2 cards with the droplet. And that'll either force them to negate your Farfa, or they'll just lose their last negate, which to me, them losing their last negate seems pretty darn good. Let me just fix this mat a little bit. There we go. From here, we can overlay, and you can do one of 2 things. If you want to make a Dante, you can. For me, once again, the Darius and Machinex have been like really good lately because you can hit for more damage, and making the Zeus is a whole lot easier. So yeah, like to me, this seems like the better play. You kill one of their monsters, main phase 2, you make a Zeus, and I would detach the Graph and the tour guide here to wipe the board, and this is all main phase 2, keep in mind. Then your Graph will trigger. It'll summon a Skarm, which will get auto popped because we control the Zeus. Actually, I'm sorry, you don't want to summon the Skarm because you already have a Skarm in grave. So you can send pretty much any BA that you want at this point. Yeah, like you, if you want to send another Skarm, you can, but I would just send a random BA just to deck thin a little bit. Like send something random like a Calcab. That way you just have it in grave, because during the end phase your Skarm is going to trigger, and your Skarm can add a tour guide back to hand from deck. So now during your opponent's turn, you're going to be able to Zeus them again and wipe their board and hope that that's enough. I mean, you hand trap them twice during their turn, and then you're able to make a Zeus on top of dropletting them. Like that's the, even going second, this deck can function going second. Like you just, it's Zeus Turbo. Like it really is Zeus Turbo. And when you're playing Zeus Turbo, it makes it pretty darn hard for your opponent to break a 4 material Zeus without losing their entire board, because you're probably going to stop them. And on top of that, the follow-up is just insane. Like you get the tour guide for follow-up, and if they, like, you draw for turn, you draw a Libic, which really isn't great, but it's a BA name, so you're going to be able to make like a Beatrice during the end phase most likely, or during main phase 2, unless you want to go into another Zeus, which you could go into another Zeus instead. It's kind of up to you, depending on what you want to do too, because I want to talk about this. Tour guide also helps you turbo into access code, so you could normal tour guide. If they have nothing to negate, then we are golden. We make our Graph here, and then we're going to link summon. Normally this becomes a Dante, but we want to OTK, so we link summon now for Cherubini, because I haven't shown a Cherubini play yet. The Cherubini hits the board, and the Graph triggers to summon a Seer. We'll put it there. From here, we can go ahead and use Cherubini effect and send a card. Let's send a Farfa. That way we could banish one of our opponent's cards, and just make it easier to OTK them. From here, we have the Libic in hand, which is just going to be used for discard fodder. But we link 3 for Unicorn. Chainlink 1 Seer will target Dante, and Chainlink 2 Unicorn discard the Libic to shuffle like one of their last cards. the Dante. Oh, Dante actually isn't in grave, so we target the Cherubini. I'm sorry, I forgot we didn't make Dante. So we target the Cherubini. Cherubini comes back. Doesn't make a difference either way. We link these for access code. Access code targets the unicorn. We could pop a card if they have another card left. We put the Zeus to attack, and this is 8,300 damage right here. So it's more than enough to kill them. But yeah, we didn't have Dante, but you didn't have to use Dante. Like, we didn't have to use Dante to do this entire thing. That's crazy. So you just bring the Cherubini back, and you make the access code with the unicorn and the Cherubini, and you're still putting 8,300 out, and your opponent probably loses. So yeah, this deck is insane. Like, it's Zeus Turbo with a lot of recurring resources, and it just makes people sit there and be really frustrated with the fact that I can't beat a deck that was made in like 2014. So yeah, very, very fun, very enjoyable. I love playing this deck. I hope everyone watching enjoys me doing videos like this because I love making them. It's an absolute blast being able to teach people how to play the deck that I've been playing since it was announced in the TCG. When they announced it, they put it on YGO Pro way back in the day, and like, they put it on within a week of them announcing the archetype, and I started playing it, and I've been playing the deck ever since. Like, this deck has been by my side the entire time. Love the deck. Absolutely fantastic. It's the one deck I can always go back to if I'm ever bored with the game and spark my interest again. So hopefully everybody enjoyed this. Hopefully this was enjoyable. If anybody has any questions, obviously let me know in the comment section. I can, talk a little bit about it. But I think that covered most of how I would play certain hands out. This deck does have some weak matchups. Don't get me wrong, the Despia matchup is a rough matchup for this deck, but doesn't mean you can't play through it. You can still play through it. The other thing I want to mention with the extra deck, so I'm just going to lay all this out here so all of you can see something. So, I believe I mentioned in the extra deck portion of the video that I cut Fortune Tune. Now, cutting Fortune Tune, well, it has its advantages because now you can play cards like the Machinex and I'll just call the Machinex engine because it's basically what it is. There's a very large disadvantage. And that's the fact that Fortune Tune can't be targeted by card effects. So, putting a card like that in your deck, your opponent can't target it, so you just attack one of their cards, detach so it doesn't get destroyed, and then you make a Zeus, and they can't target the Fortune Tune. That to me is very, very important. So I wanted to do a pure XYZ extra deck for one of the ideas that I had, and I think it's possible. Obviously, I would keep the purple Dante, and I just cut the 6 Link Monsters. I would put in a second Downerd. I'd put in the Fortune Tune. I'd put in the 3rd Zeus. I'd put in a Break Sword. I'd put in probably something like an Alucard, probably like an Alucard, or I just put the Utopia engine, which would be 6 cards. There's a lot that you can do. There's definitely a lot of different ways you can go. If you want to play a pure XYZ build, obviously 3 Zeus is preferred in the pure XYZ build. But yeah, that basically rounds up the video. I hope I gave everybody an ample amount of information to pilot Burning Abyss correctly and make the deck do what I intend for it to do. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Obviously, smash the subscribe button because it's significantly appreciated. Turn the notification bell on so you know when I upload more cool and awesome videos like this one that you're watching. And yeah, that's it for my new and updated How to Play Burning Abyss video. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And for right now, this is Drew, Traveler of the Burning Abyss, signing out.